Now, for more on this story, I'd like to welcome Mark Cutts to the program. He's the United Nations Deputy Regional Humanitarian Coordinator for the Syria crisis, and he joins us from Turkey's southeastern province of Gaziantep. Thank you so much for being with us, sir. Now, almost a decade into this conflict, and we're facing yet another humanitarian catastrophe. Can you talk us through the daily lives of the hundreds of thousands of people that are fleeing this ongoing bombardment?
Yeah, well, this is a truly shocking situation. There were already about 1.5 million displaced people in this area. They had fled there from places like Homs and Aleppo and Raqqa and Eastern Ghouta, from all the other big battles that took place in this long war in Syria. And now these same people are having to flee again. In the last month, what we've seen is hundreds of thousands of people first fled from southern Idlib when Marat an-Numan was taken, and they moved northwards. And then the areas that they took refuge in started being bombed, and so they fled again. Many of these people have had to flee 5 or 6 or 7 or even more times during this long and brutal war. And, we're talking about a population where the majority of them are women and children and elderly people. It's really a horrific situation on the ground at the moment.
And there's, of course, the difficult question. Yes, the UN has appealed for $336 million to help. Yes, an emergency session has been called. But you've got prominent activists like Waid al-Khatib saying the UN has actually failed Idlib.
Well, I think the whole world has failed Idlib and has failed the people of Syria on this occasion because, international law is meant to protect civilians in times of conflict like this. And yet we're seeing that this is a war where the ones suffering most are the civilians. Towns and villages are being bombed, hospitals and schools and bakeries and marketplaces. We've had more than 1,500 civilians killed in the last few months. And it's not just the civilians, even, the staff in hospitals. We had a director of one of the hospitals that was killed just a few days ago. 3 of our humanitarian workers killed in the last week alone. So this is a really big crisis, and we need the world to wake up and take action.
The world does need to wake up and take action, and you've just gone through a list of everything that's wrong with the area, what the civilians are being exposed to. But what are you doing? What is the United Nations doing at this stage?
The Secretary General has called for an immediate cessation of hostilities. We've raised this at the Security Council on countless occasions, but unfortunately we're not seeing the Security Council act and come up with a proper ceasefire on this occasion. It is a crisis, as you say, and for our staff on the ground, we're doing a lot. We've got 15,000 humanitarian workers in that area. They are Syrians. They're being supported by international actors. We have a $2.2 billion aid operation that has taken place over the last year. This aid operation has been going on for years. So there's a lot that is being done, but it's not just about giving people food and tents and blankets. It's about protecting these civilians who've got nowhere else to go. The border to Turkey is closed. They're being bombed from the air. There are Syrian government forces advancing from the south. They're trapped in a war zone.
And I do want to talk about the international community. Would it be accurate to say that we are at a deadlock here? One of the few options is for Europe to support Turkey in a bid to block the Bashar al-Assad offensive. That's if it doesn't want another refugee crisis on its doorstep.
Well, the world needs to ensure that civilians are protected. If they're not going to be able to come into Turkey or to go to other countries as refugees, then they have to be protected inside their own country. But unfortunately, that's not happening at the moment. These people are they're locked into this area. They're fleeing in all directions, and it's the winter. We're seeing the rains, cold weather. These are people, many of them living in tents in the mud. Some of them have been living in these kind of conditions for years, and now they're moving again. It's a really horrible situation.
Mark Cutts, thank you so much for speaking to us, a regional humanitarian coordinator for the United Nations for the crisis in Syria, of course, talking us through what the civilians in the Idlib province are going through.